They didn't disappear all at once. That's what makes this harder to explain. When the caravan finally stopped being seen as a single group, no alarms were raised. No search parties were immediately sent. No reports described a catastrophe. Instead, the people simply began arriving separately, weeks later, months later, in different towns, with different stories. And by the time anyone realized the caravan itself was gone, it was already too late to reconstruct what had actually happened. This is the story of a wagon caravan that changed its route and was never seen together again. At first, nothing about the journey stood out. The caravan departed during one of the most active periods of westward migration, when hundreds of similar groups were moving along the same established trails. These routes were not easy, but they were known. They had water point, landmarks, places where travelers expected to find others like them. Safety, in the Old West, was rarely about protection. It was about predictability. This caravan had that. Its departure was documented, its composition recorded. Families, laborers, guides, and livestock moving with a clear destination in mind. Diaries mention optimism, cautious planning, and confidence that the journey, while difficult, was manageable. For a time, the caravan followed the main trail for weeks without incident. Supplies were consumed at the expected rate. Animals held up. Progress was steady. Then the pressure began to build. Delays accumulated. Weather shifted. Water sources were not as reliable as expected. Rumors circulated along the trail. Stories of faster routes, alternative passes, shortcuts that could save precious time and supplies. These rumors were not uncommon. Every season, travelers exchanged advice, some of it accurate, much of it not. But under strain, even questionable information can become attractive. At a critical point in the journey, the caravan faced a decision: remain on the established route, accepting delays and growing scarcity, or divert onto an alternative path that promised quicker passage but came with uncertainty. Contemporary records confirm the debate. Some members warned against leaving the main trail. Others argued that continuing forward would exhaust their resources before reaching the next known stop. The pressure was not abstract. It was immediate. Food, water, animals. The decision was made under stress, not ignorance. The caravan changed its route. This moment would later be treated casually in summaries, a minor deviation, a calculated risk. But for those involved, it was a turning point. From that moment on, the journey changed character. The alternative route was narrower, less traveled. Landmarks were harder to identify. Water sources were fewer and farther between. Progress slowed, not accelerated. Small problems began to compound. Wagons broke down more frequently. Animals weakened. Repairs took time. Every stop cost resources the caravan could not replace. As conditions worsened, cohesion began to erode. Not dramatically, quietly. Groups formed within the caravan based on trust, strength, and shared priorities. Families stayed close to family. Younger men walked ahead to scout. Others lagged behind, struggling to keep pace. This fragmentation was subtle at first, but it mattered because once the caravan stopped moving as a single unit, decision-making fractured with it. Some pushed to move faster. Others argued for rest. Some believed pressing forward was the only option. Others feared the route itself was the problem. At several points, the caravan paused to reassess. Diaries describe arguments that ended without resolution. Decisions made not because they were agreed upon, but because no alternative was clear. Eventually, small groups began to break away, not as an act of rebellion, as an act of survival. Some believed they could reach known settlements faster by splitting off. Others followed side routes they believed would reconnect with the main trail. A few turned back entirely. These choices were not recorded as disappearances. They were recorded as separation. This distinction is important because separation implies intention. Disappearance implies failure. The historical record prefers the former. Over the following months, individuals and small groups in the caravan began appearing in distant locations. Some reached towns hundreds of miles apart. Some arrived injured. Some arrived with partial accounts of what had happened. No two stories matched completely. Some claimed the caravan had continued ahead. Others believe it had turned south. A few insisted it had broken apart entirely. None of them could say for certain. What they shared was exhaustion and uncertainty. Crucially, no one ever reported seeing the caravan again as a whole. Not at a river crossing, not at a settlement, not at a supply point. It simply ceased to exist as a single entity. This absence did not immediately alarm authorities. Caravans fragmented all the time. People arrived separately. Losses were common. Communication was slow. Months could pass before patterns became clear. By the time officials began comparing records, the trail had gone cold. The individuals who arrived later were treated as survivors, not witnesses. Their accounts were accepted, summarized, and filed. Contradictions were attributed to stress and time. No attempt was made to reconstruct the caravan's final movements in detail, because doing so would have required confronting something uncomfortable, that the journey had not ended in one place. It had ended everywhere. The missing members were not listed as dead. They were simply unaccounted for. Names appeared in early rosters and never again. Families mentioned in departure records were reduced to single individuals in arrival logs. Entire wagons vanished in the story without explanation. No graves were marked. No attack was confirmed. No final moment was recorded. Just absence. And absence in the Old West was easier to accept than investigation. As time passed, the story stabilized. The caravan became one of many that took a wrong route and paid the price. Survivors were acknowledged. Losses were generalized. The specifics blurred. The fragmentations were treated as personal choices. The disappearances normalized as frontier risk. The caravan itself faded into abstraction. But when the original records are read together, the diaries, the arrival logs, the partial testimonies, a different picture emerges, not of a sudden disaster, but of a slow collapse. A group that did not fail in one moment, but lost its ability to function as a group under sustained pressure. And once that happened, the journey stopped being shared. What followed was not a single ending. It was dozens of them. And that is what makes this caravan different. Not that people disappeared, but that no one could ever say where the caravan itself went, or when it truly ended. Over time, the story of the caravan settled into a version that felt both reasonable and familiar. According to the accepted historical account, the group did not suffer a single defining catastrophe. There was no ambush, no massacre, no moment where the caravan vanished all at once. Instead, the journey is described as a gradual breakdown under pressure, shaped by environment, exhaustion, and individual decision-making. The caravan's decision to leave the established route is framed as difficult but understandable. Delays had accumulated. Supplies were being consumed faster than anticipated. Water sources were less reliable than expected. Weather conditions were unpredictable. Continuing along the main trail no longer felt safe. At that moment, the alternative route appeared not as a gamble, but as an option. One that promised to shorten the journey and reduce exposure to worsening conditions ahead. The choice was not unanimous, but was made within the context of necessity rather than recklessness. Historians emphasize this point. The travelers were not ignorant of the risk. They were responding to them. Once the caravan changed course, conditions deteriorated more rapidly than anticipated. The terrain proved harsher. Progress slowed. Wagons required more frequent repairs. Animals weakened under the strain. Water and food rationing became stricter. Under these circumstances, the caravan cohesion began to erode. The accepted narrative presents this erosion not as failure, but as adaptation. As difficulties mounted, travelers began making individual assessments of the situation. Some believed their chances of survival would improve if they moved faster in smaller groups. Others chose routes they believed would reconnect with known trails or settlement. A few, faced with the reality of their condition, turned back. These decisions are described as rational responses to extreme conditions. Fragmentation, in this version, was not chaos, it was strategy. The historical account stresses that wagon caravans rarely remained intact throughout an entire journey. Separation was common, especially during periods of scarcity. Travelers did not experience the journey uniformly, and survival often depended on personal choices rather than group consensus. From this perspective, the caravan did not disappear. It dispersed. The appearance of survivors months later in different towns supports this interpretation. These individuals are cited as proof that the alternative route, while punishing, was navigable. Their survival demonstrates that the journey did not end in complete disaster. Losses occurred, but they are framed as expected. Illness, dehydration, exhaustion, and accidents were constant threats in frontier travel. Not all deaths were witnessed. Not all were recorded. Many occurred far from settlements, leaving no official trace. The historical record treats this lack of documentation as inevitable. Record-keeping in the mid-19th century was inconsistent. Many travelers never appeared in formal registry. Communication between settlements was slow and unreliable. Survivors could only report what they personally experienced or observed. As a result, gaps in the record are not presented as suspicious. They are presented as normal. The accepted version also emphasizes that no contemporary authority raised alarms at the time. No coordinated search was launched. No official investigation was recorded. This absence of response is interpreted as evidence that nothing extraordinary was believed to have occurred. Caravans fragmented frequently. People arrived separately. Losses were absorbed into the broader reality of westward migration. From this standpoint, the caravan's fate required no special explanation. It became a cautionary example rather than a mystery. Later summaries reflect this tone. The story is condensed into a few essential elements: a route change, increasing hardship, fragmentation, partial survival. The caravan's identity as a single group fades, replaced by individual outcomes. The focus shifts away from what was lost and toward what continued. This framing aligns comfortably with the broader narrative of westward expansion. Migration was dangerous. Many died. Some survived. Progress continued. Within that context, the caravan does not stand out. It does not challenge assumption. It does not demand accountability. It does not suggest failure beyond the personal. The explanation resolves itself. Fragmentation accounts for the absence of a final location. Individual survival explains the scattered arrivals. Missing names are attributed to undocumented deaths. Conflicting accounts are explained by stress, exhaustion, and the passage of time. The story becomes stable, and once it becomes stable, it stops being examined. What is rarely emphasized is how much the accepted version relies on generalization. Specific numbers are avoided. Names are rarely followed from departure to arrival. Family units are not tracked in detail. Wagons are counted at the beginning, but not reconciled at the end. This lack of precision is not treated as a flaw. It is treated as unavoidable. The historical narrative assumes that the caravan's journey dissolved gradually into individual experiences that cannot be fully reconstructed. The absence of a single ending is framed as proof that no single ending existed. In this view, the caravan did not fail. It simply ceased to matter as a unit. The journey, according to the accepted account, ended the way many did in that era. Unevenly, incompletely, and without ceremony, survivors carried on. Losses were absorbed into the silence of the frontier. And because this explanation fits comfortably within what we already believe about the Old West, it endured. It does not shock. It does not disturb. It does not require further inquiry. But it does rely on an assumption that is never stated outright. That fragmentation explains everything. That once people separate, their stories no longer need to align. That disappearance does not require reconstruction. That absence does not demand answer. This is where the historical version quietly stops, not because the evidence ends, but because the questions do. And it is precisely at that point where explanation gives way to acceptance that the ground beneath the story begins to shift. Because when the original records are examined together, the explanation starts to feel less complete than it appears. Not false, but insufficient. And insufficiency, repeated often enough, can begin to feel like certainty. That is the version history accepted, and it remains convincing right up until someone decides to look at what it leaves behind. The accepted version survives because it feels reasonable. That is its strength. And its weakness, it asks you to believe that fragmentation explains everything. That once people separated, their stories no longer needed to align. That disappearance became an administrative detail, rather than a historical problem. But when the records are examined together, carefully, without summary, this explanation begins to fail in ways that cannot be ignored. The first failure is scale. Fragmentation, as described in the historical account, is treated as gradual and voluntary. Small groups leave. Individuals choose different paths. Survival becomes personal. Yet the departure rosters show a caravan large enough that its dissolution should have left a measurable trail. It didn't. The number of people who later appear in arrival logs, settlement records, and census data is not just smaller, it is disproportionately smaller. Not by a handful, by margins that exceed what illness, exhaustion, or individual separation typically account for. This is not attrition, it is collapse. The second failure is timing. If the caravan fragmented gradually, then separation should appear spread across time and geography. But the arrivals that do occur cluster unnaturally. Groups appear within similar windows, reporting similar hardships, yet offering incompatible explanations for where the rest of the caravan went. Some insist the main body press forward. Others are certain to turn away. A few claim it split again after the initial separation. These cannot all be true. The accepted version absorbs these contradictions by labeling them stress-induced memory errors. But memory errors do not consistently point in different directions. They blur details. They do not fabricate entire routes. The third failure is logistics. Fragmentation assumes mobility. For small groups to leave the main caravan and reach settlements independently, they needed resources: food, water, animals, navigational certainty. Yet many of those who arrived later describe having none of these. They speak of traveling on foot, of abandoning wagon, of losing animals early, and still they arrived. What they cannot explain is how others, in equal or worse condition, simply vanished. Not died, vanished. No graves, no remains, no confirmed attack sites, no final camp location, just absence. The accepted narrative explains this by pointing to the vastness of the terrain. But vastness does not erase pattern. If dozens of people died along the route, there would be clusters, shared locations, repeated landmarks, consistency in where loss occurred. There is none. Fourth failure lies in documentation behavior. In other caravan disasters, well-documented ones, authorities eventually attempted reconstruction. Routes were mapped. Survivors were questioned in detail. Losses were estimated, even if imperfectly. Here, that effort stops early, not because there was nothing to investigate, but because the story had already stabilized. Once fragmentation became the explanation, inquiry became unnecessary. This is where the accepted version stops being descriptive and starts being defensive, because fragmentation does not just explain loss, it disperses responsibility. If everyone made individual choices, then no decision can be blamed. If the caravan ceased to exist as a unit, then no one failed as a leader. If disappearance was gradual, then there is no moment to examine. Failure dissolves into circumstance. The fifth failure is psychological. Survivor testimonies show patterns that do not align with voluntary separation. Accounts describe hesitation, confusion, repeated attempts to regroup, people waiting longer than they should have for others to appear. This is not the behavior of individuals confidently choosing independence. It is the behavior of people who expected reunion, and it never came. The accepted narrative treats these expectations as naive, but they were rational. Caravans depended on cohesion. Shared navigation reduced error. Group presence deterred threats. Separation increased risk. To leave permanently would have required certainty. The testimonies show none. Instead, they show people making temporary choices that became permanent by force of circumstance, which raises a question the historical version never asked. What happened during the window when the caravan still existed, but was no longer cohesive? Because that is where the disappearance concentrates. The sixth failure is silence, not dramatic silence, administrative silence. Names appear in departure lists and vanish. Family units dissolve without explanation. Wagons counted at the start are never reconciled at the end. This is not unusual in frontier history. What is unusual is how quickly this silence was accepted. There was no debate, no alternative theory preserved alongside the accepted one, no lingering concern noted in official correspondence. The caravan did not become controversial. It became forgettable. That is not how unexplained loss usually behaves, unless forgetting is the goal. The seventh failure is comparison. When this caravan is placed alongside others that survived similar conditions, the differences are stark. Other groups lost members, yes, but they retained identity. They arrived fragmented, but recognizable. Their losses clustered around identifiable events. This caravan did not. Its losses are diffuse. Its ending is everywhere. Its identity dissolves before arrival. Fragmentation explains separation. It does not explain erasure. The eighth failure is narrative convenient. The accepted version resolved the story without creating a problem. No authority failed. No guide made a fatal error. No route choice demands accountability. No decision requires re-examination. The caravan simply became too complex to track. This is not an explanation. It is an abdication, because complexity does not eliminate responsibility. It demands investigation, which never came. The brutal truth is this: the caravan did not simply fragment. It crossed a threshold where cohesion collapsed faster than documentation could keep up. And once that happened, disappearance became normalized. People did not need to die violently to vanish from history. They only needed to fall outside the structure that recorded survival. What followed was not one tragedy. It was dozens of small, unrecorded endings. Some may have died alone. Some may have turned back and been absorbed into other groups. Some may have reached settlements under new names. Some may have collapsed days behind those who survived. We cannot know, because no one tried to find out. And that is the most unsettling part. The mystery is not that the caravan disappeared. The mystery is that its disappearance was accepted so quickly. The historical record did not fail because it lacked evidence. It failed because it decided it had enough. Enough to move on. Enough to stop asking. Enough to turn absence into normality. Fragmentation became the answer because it allowed the story to end without consequence. But stories that end too cleanly often leave something behind. In this case, what was left behind were people. Not as names, not as graves, not as numbers, but as gaps. Gaps large enough to suggest that the journey did not simply disperse. It unraveled, and once it unraveled, there was no single ending to record. Only silence. That silence was not empty. It was full of decisions that no longer had witnesses, full of losses that no longer had context, full of a caravan that did not die, but ceased to exist in any way that could be accounted for. History did not erase this caravan. It allowed it to dissolve, and once dissolved, it became safe to summarize, safe to simplify, safe to forget. The route change is recorded. The fragmentation was explained. The disappearances were absorbed. The file was closed. Quietly, if this investigation held your attention, consider leaving a like and subscribing. It helps ensure that stories like this are examined, rather than quietly resolved.